And welcome to this week's Biz Buzz segment on the Blank Page to Bestseller podcast. I am your host, Peter, and as always, I am joined by Colleen and KZ. And on this week's Biz Buzz, we are talking about a topic that has come up probably more often than I ever thought it would on Threads. And that topic is basically, what is a book blurb? I've seen a lot of authors, a lot of even, uh, author assistants, personal assistants, people who work in the industry ask that question, what is a book blurb? And then a lot of authors seem to struggle with writing book blurbs. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today is what is a book blurb and why is it so important for authors? Why do they fret about it so much? So again, as we kind of seem to have been doing the last couple of weeks, we're going to go to our resident author on the staff, and that's KZ. So, KZ, can you just give us a real quick high level overview of what you think a book blurb is?
I'm going to be really short and sweet, Peter. A book blurb is your sales copy. You can call it a lot of different things, but in reality, whatever you write to get the attention of potential readers, you call it a blurb. And now there are different ways of thinking about it. Some people think of a blurb as a description of your book. Other people think of it as uh, a a I don't know, just an enticement. And I tend to go that direction. I tend to go with something that is going to catch people's attention and entice them to want to read on. In a traditional world, if you think in terms of your back cover of the book, the blurb is on the back cover, and the purpose of that is to get them to open the book
Mhm.
and start to read it and page through it.
I know we've talked about the importance of book covers in general, how it can be within just a couple of seconds that a reader may decide that they want to buy your book. And I definitely think that the book blurb being on the back is an important part of that decision that author or that readers have when they pick up your book. So I definitely love the idea of how you call it like marketing copy. Another thing you had kind of mentioned is a book blurb a description? And you kind of touched on that. You say that a book blurb can be a description or it can be an enticement. So just for the general rule, would you put a difference between a book description and a book blurb?
I would, yes, and the distinction I would put between them totally depends on what the readers are expecting. I'll give you a quick example in fiction. Okay, in fiction, if I'm writing a book blurb for a cozy mystery, okay, I'm going to write something that is much longer, that is going to introduce characters, it's going to introduce the mystery, it's going to introduce some of the plot as well. But if I'm writing the same thing for a contemporary romance, I'm going to just really hit on the romance angle, and that's really all I'm going to do is hit on the romance, and it's going to be short and sweet, and it's not going to give you any plotting. It's not going to give you any of the background necessarily.
Mhm.
It's straight marketing. Just say, hey, this is romance. Come in and get it. It's hot.
That definitely is a very romance fiction, a romance genre description, I believe.
Yep, it is.
So part of this kind of comes down to really where you're using this copy, correct? Would I be correct in assuming that?
100%. I think that is where the true difference is. And you can tell by looking, for instance, go to Amazon and just begin reading some of the see more section where when you see the book title and then it says a little bit of something and then see more. If you open those up and look, you can tell that this is considered to be a description, but many authors put the blurb in there as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that is important as well. Like you mentioned, blurbs are definitely marketing oriented. They're there to catch the reader's attention, to get them to click on that buy now button or, take their book and put it in their basket up to the register at their local bookstore. But let's talk just a little bit more. You mentioned that Amazon, because that's, I think, where a lot of readers will also see it. Um, what you're really saying there is the book blurb and the book description kind of go hand in hand and kind of fit together in that area, correct?
Yes, you'll
Yep.
see very often you'll see a book blurb at the very beginning to get people to click that see more.
Hmm.
And then further down, you'll see a bit more of what would be a description. When I think of description, I'm thinking in terms of something that's going to give not a step by step what the book is about, but it's going to give more information about the plot, about if it's a happily ever after,
Hmm.
if it's nonfiction, let's stick with that. So in a nonfiction book, you're much more likely to see a description in that area and less
Hmm.
of a blurb.
Hmm.
Okay, so it really does depend on the ultimate reader. So it definitely blurb and description go hand in hand.
Hmm.
When I
That's
write a blurb, I often start with a description and then pull it back.
I think that's a really smart way to do it. I know that's probably something that has come across in my threads scrolling is a lot of people don't understand that a book description and a book blurb are so closely related.
Yeah, that seems fair.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love the again, like you mentioned, um it's to catch the reader's attention. So, like, let's cover this what we've gone over so far real quick. So, a book blurb is a piece of marketing copy that is meant to entice the reader to either open up the book, click the buy now button, or do something with that book, purchase the book, become a real reader of that book. And you can find that a lot of times on the back cover of many printed books, or you might also see that in the beginning part of the Amazon description, or the Amazon about the book, when you go onto that book's page, correct?
Yes, and you'll also see it if you're on Facebook or other social media and you're seeing ads.
Mhm.
It's the blurb is almost certainly going to be a part of that.
Oh, that's a great little piece of advice because I think a lot of times too is um authors, I mean, we all know we're writers, we like to write. So we kind of sometimes forget that we can reuse some of the things that we have. We
Yep.
don't have to start from scratch every time. So having if you're running a Facebook ad like you mentioned, or some other piece of marketing that's not just paired directly with the book, that the book blurb can also be used there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I found kind of interesting, and I want to hear your two's thoughts on this. I was reading up on book blurbs, and I was on the Independent Book Reviews website. I'm not sure if either of you have heard of them before, but they were talking about book blurbs, and we've kind of come across most of what we think a book blurb is, but their take on it was a little bit different. First of all, they say that a book blurb is not a book description. I think that's something that we can all agree on. It's close to a book description, but it's not the book description. But the
Correct.
thing that they kind of separated from where I saw other places where they were saying book blurbs are kind of similar to editorial reviews. I know we've talked about those before. So that's kind of something different that I hadn't really thought of before, but that's like the one or two little sentence reviews from industry professionals. Thoughts on that from either of you?
Colleen, anything on that? I know you've done quite a bit of work on the editorial reviews.
You know what? You bring that up, so I see where they're saying that, but I'm not really sure. I'm I'm not sure I agree with that. I think of like, ooh, that's a good one. Um,
Yeah, I know. I was kind of going through the same thing when I was thinking that. I was like, it was probably the second or third article that I ran across, and they were the only one that mentioned book blurbs being editorial reviews.
I agree with both of you. I think that they're a little off track on that. I can see where if I was looking for an editorial review and I wanted something that is really pithy, I might take something out of that and use that as part of my blurb. But most of the editorial reviews that I want as a writer, as an author, I want in depth.
Mhm,
I want more than a line or two.
mhm.
right.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead, Colin.
No, I agree with that because their editorial reviews are more. It's like a deeper uh, conversation about the book and the professionalism they see. Especially if it's a nonfiction book or that type of thing.
100% agree with you,
Mhm.
Colleen. Yeah. That's a very confusing concept that they've that they've introduced there, Peter.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not alone in thinking that. I think I can kind of see a little bit about what you were going with there too, KZ, about how maybe you might pull off a quick couple of words or a couple of highlighted sections from a review to put into your book blurb, but like that doesn't make the book blurb, and that's not the whole book blurb.
Yeah, and if you're waiting for editorial reviews before you write a book blurb, you're going to have a hard time finding those editorial reviews.
No, that's so true. Yeah, because I'm sure the that's going to be a primer for what the reviewers are going to use to, set the stage for when they go and dive into your book.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll tell you something. I write my blurb, my first draft of my blurb. I write it at the same time I finish my first draft of my book.
Hmm.
Everything is fresh in my mind at that moment. It's as fresh as it's ever going to be. I haven't begun revision. So the whole concept is very, very, very present for me right at that moment. So I sit down and I write my description and I write if I haven't already done one, a lot of times I've already done a summary of it, which I'll turn into a description.
Hmm.
But at that point is when I write my blurb. And it may not be the final blurb because I may change things. I definitely will.
Hmm.
But that's my first blurb is when I write the book.
And I think of the editorial reviews also, they're like an endorsement of the book.
Mm,
That usually
yes.
an influencer or someone very close and knows the topic or the author or the story. They leave that review and then people are like, wow, they wrote that review, that editorial review. That's huge. Let me see what I can look and maybe I'll be interested in reading the book.
Totally, totally get that. That's absolutely true. I agree 100% on that, Colleen. Yeah, it's a
Hmm.
good point. That's what you look for with an editorial review. I mean, we only get so many of those. We can't share editorial reviews in everywhere.
Hmm.
So yeah, so we want to be able to get the best ones we can.
Yeah, so let me kind of go a little bit more into this book blurb thing, just to kind of high level stuff, because I think all three of us spend a lot of time in the back end of whether it be KDP, whether it be Ingram Spark, whatever you might call or whatever you might use for your publishing and your printing part of things. One thing that kind of clicked with me a little bit the more I dove into what book blurbs are is um, for example, in Ingram Spark, there's an option for a long description and there's an option for a short description. And I was always like, why the heck do you have two different descriptions? But realistically, that short description being only a couple of hundred words is really what the book blurb is.
150 to 200 words book blurb.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. And I think part of the confusion behind book blurbs and um, why they can cause some stumbling blocks for authors is we just really haven't quite settled on the definition that we use within the industry. Would I be wrong in saying that?
I don't know if it's so much wrong as I think there is still a lot of confusion because the terminology isn't universally used. It's not so much
Hmm.
that it's wrong, it's just not universally used. And there's always confusion for writers. Most of us who are writers have specific types of writing that we are stronger in and than others. And writing a blurb is a marketing skill.
Hmm.
So many writers struggle with taking the concept, taking the making that change in the paradigm shift that you need to make from writer of the book, okay, and addressing the topic of the book to the marketer of the book, the person who is selling it, and getting into the head of the person who is going to buy it. And that's the real distinction between a description and a blurb,
Hmm.
is who it's aimed at. In a blurb, you have to be in the head of the person that you are aiming to have buy that book. Does that make sense, Peter?
Yeah, I definitely think that makes sense. And I definitely think I agree with you on why a lot of authors find that as a stumbling block. Because you're right, there's a lot of authors out there who be great storytellers, but they don't necessarily translate their skills over into marketing copy.
That's right.
Mhm.
Fortunately, that is a learned skill, by the way.
It is. Oh yeah, it 100% is.
Yep,
But you're right. You can use the you can really fall in love with your story. And I think the other thing too is partially that authors fall in love with their story, but they don't necessarily fall in love with it and know how to tell their reader why they've fallen in love with it or what a reader would connect with. Is that kind of on the right track there?
I think you are. What I think what if I'm following you on this, the writer of the story is fully involved and engulfed in the story, and it's very difficult when you're in the weeds to
Hmm.
to come up and see above the weeds and to write the marketing blurbs, to write the marketing copy in general. You have to come up into the trees so you
Hmm.
can see the bigger picture.
Right, right. Yeah, I think we as writers sometimes try to tell everyone everything all the time, but that's not necessarily what you see in a book blurb.
That's right. I can tell you something a book blurb is not. It is not a step by step description of what your plot is. It is not a step by step description of what the reader is going to get in the book. It is that's the description. Okay,
Hmm.
that's the synopsis. That's the summary. You see all these terms, and they all mean the same thing with some distinctions. So the blurb is a distinct entity in my book, and that's because it's marketing. Everything else you write about your book is part of the description or the summary or the synopsis or even the précis of the book.
That I think hopefully today we've been able to talk enough about what book blurbs are because I think it's cleared up a little bit of confusion. We've put a little bit of a more refined definition of what a book blurb is. But is there anything that we haven't covered that we think is important for authors to know when they are writing their book blurb?
One thing I'd like to say is don't get discouraged. If you are a writer and you just don't feel like your blurbs are cutting the mustard, they're not actually doing what you want them to do. Reach out into the community. There are many people who are really good at blurb writing, and it is not expensive to get a blurb written for you. In the scheme of things, it really is not. And once you have a few good blurbs under your belt, whether you wrote them or someone else did, that's a pattern that you can use, and that's a lesson you can teach yourself. There are also places where there are also people who offer classes and training in writing blurbs. So that's a topic for another day, I think. But I guess that was my message: is don't get discouraged. Understand what a blurb is if you're a writer. Understand how the blurb is used, and learn to write it.
No, that's definitely, I think, probably a nice, clear, succinct way to put it. Um, you know, again, thank you both for hopping on and talking about book blurbs today. Listeners, if you have any questions on book blurbs, if you have any thoughts on book blurbs, please be sure to reach out, let us know, send us a message, hop down in the show comments, send us a comment there. As we're here, on our podcast, also remember that this is also live, or not live on YouTube, but it is recorded and placed on YouTube, for you to listen to as well. So please be sure to check us out on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe to the Author's Voice YouTube channel to get these Biz Buzz segments on YouTube as well. And again, leave us a comment, let us know what you liked, what questions you might have about any of our topics, and we're always looking for new Biz Buzz segments. So your question might just be our next week's segment.